My name is Marissa, and at 28 years old, I became the secret owner of Pineriidge Resort in the Colorado mountains. As a financial advisor, I should have known better than to empty my life savings for a rundown property. But some dreams refuse to wait. I never told my family about my investment planning to surprise them at the perfect moment. That moment came during a celebratory dinner when my parents proudly announced, "Your brother's kids will love growing up here in the mountains." I simply smiled and said, "That is interesting. If only they knew what was in my bag." Let me know where you are watching from in the comments below, and if your family has ever overlooked your achievements, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you will want to see how this unfolds. I grew up in suburban Denver with my parents Thomas and Linda, and my younger brother Jake. From the earliest days, I can remember it was clear who the favorite child was. Jake could bring home C grades and get taken out for ice cream. I would bring home straight A's and get a quick good job before the conversation turned to whatever Jake was doing. This pattern was so consistent that by the time I was 10, I stopped expecting acknowledgement. While Jake was the star athlete with mediocre grades, I was the studious one who also managed to be captain of the debate team. My parents attended every single one of Jake's football games, but they made it to only 2 of my debate competitions throughout high school, both times leaving early because Jake needed something. The favoritism went beyond attention. For his 16th birthday, Jake received a used but decent car. For mine, I got a watch and a lecture about saving for my own vehicle. So that is exactly what I did. I started working at 12 babysitting for neighbors. By 14, I had a paper route. At 16, I was working weekends at the local grocery store while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. My financial discipline started early. Half of everything I earned went into savings that I refused to touch. My parents called it an unhealthy obsession with money. I called it self-reliance. I recognized early that, if I wanted anything in life, I would need to provide it for myself. College followed the same pattern. Jake went to Colorado State on a partial athletic scholarship with our parents covering the rest. I won an academic scholarship to University of Colorado Boulder, but still worked 20 hours a week to cover living expenses. I studied finance and economics, graduating summa cum laude, while Jake barely finished with a general studies degree after 5.5 years. After college, I landed a job at Westridge Financial, one of the most prestigious firms in Denver. I worked 70-hour weeks, lived frugally in a tiny apartment, and continued saving aggressively. By 26, I became the youngest partner in the firm's history. My parents celebrated by taking the family out to dinner, where they spent most of the evening talking about Jake's new business idea, a food truck that specialized in gourmet grilled cheese. The food truck failed within 6 months, so did the artisanal coffee shop that came after it, and the custom snowboard company. Each time my parents bailed him out financially. Each time I got phone calls about how I should help my brother because family supports family. Each time I politely declined, which led to tense family gatherings where I was painted as the selfish daughter who would not share her success. Jake and I had been close as children. He was my little brother and I adored him despite the favoritism. We would build snow forts together in winter and catch fireflies in summer. But as we grew older, the dynamics changed. He became entitled, expecting others to solve his problems. I became self-sufficient, perhaps to a fault. By our 20s, our relationship was cordial but distant. Throughout all this, I carried one consistent dream. When I was 9, our family spent a summer week at Pinewood Lodge, a small, family-owned mountain resort, with 6 rustic cabins and a main lodge. I fell in love with the pine-scented air, the crackling fireplace, and the kind elderly couple who owned it. They seemed so content, providing a beautiful experience for families while living in their own slice of paradise. One day I told my mother as we drove away, "I am going to own a place like this." She patted my head and said, "That is nice, dear, but those places are for rich people. Better to focus on realistic goals." That dismissal only strengthened my resolve. Every year on my birthday, I would look at mountain resort listings online, not to buy but to dream. I calculated how much such properties cost, what renovations might be needed, and developed business plans in my spare time. It became more than a dream. It became a plan. By 27, I had stopped seeking parental approval. Therapy helped me understand that I might never receive the validation I craved from my family. Instead, I focused on building my own life according to my own values. I dated occasionally but kept relationships casual, not wanting anything to distract from my financial goals. Friends called me driven. Family called me obsessed. I called myself determined. The emotional journey of learning to validate myself rather than seeking external approval was difficult. There were nights I cried myself to sleep after family gatherings where Jake's latest venture was celebrated while my consistent success was treated as expected. But each time I would wake up the next morning, look at my growing investment portfolio, and remind myself that I was building something for me, not for their approval. Little did my family know, all those years of saving and investing were about to manifest into something tangible, something that would force them to see me differently. Or so I thought. The discovery of Pineriidge Resort happened purely by chance during one of my solo hiking trips. I had started hiking as a form of stress relief from the demands of my corporate job. That particular Sunday in April, I had chosen a new trail about 2 hours from Denver, seeking some solitude after a particularly tense family Easter dinner, where my parents had announced they were investing in Jake's newest business, Idea, a craft brewery. The trail wound through a beautiful pine forest before opening to a vista overlooking a small valley. From that vantage point, I spotted what looked like a cluster of cabins near a small lake. Curious, I followed a side trail down and found myself at the entrance to Pineriidge Resort. The sign was weathered, one corner hanging loose. The gravel driveway needed work. But as I walked onto the property, I felt an immediate connection. 5 rustic cabins surrounded a central lodge built of timber and stone. A small dock extended into the clear mountain lake, and 15 acres of woodland stretched up the mountainside behind the buildings. "Can I help you?" a voice called out. An elderly man emerged from the main lodge, walking with a slight limp. "I am sorry, I was just hiking and saw your resort," I explained. "It is beautiful." The man, who introduced himself as Harold Wilson, invited me in for coffee. As we sat in the lodge's great room, with its soaring ceiling and massive stone fireplace, he shared that he and his wife Margaret had run the resort for 42 years. Margaret had passed away the previous winter and his own health was declining. Their children had careers in other states and no interest in taking over. "I need to sell," he said, his voice heavy with resignation. "But I cannot bear the thought of some corporation buying it and tearing everything down for condos." As he spoke, I found myself mentally cataloging everything that needed repair: the leaking roof, the outdated electrical system, the worn furniture. But I also saw the potential, the solid foundation, the perfect location, the breathtaking views. The emotional pull I felt was impossible to ignore. "How much are you asking?" I heard myself say, surprising us both. The price Harold quoted was substantial, but not outrageous given the location and acreage. It would require every penny of my savings, liquidating my retirement accounts, and taking a second mortgage on my condo. It was financially reckless by any standard calculation, especially for someone in my profession who advised others on responsible money management. Yet I knew with absolute certainty this was my opportunity. This was the dream I had nurtured for 20 years. "I would need to arrange financing," I said carefully, "but I am seriously interested." Harold studied me for a long moment. "You remind me of Margaret when she was young, same determined look in your eyes." Over the next few weeks, I visited the property multiple times. I hired inspectors and contractors to assess what I was getting into. The reports confirmed what I already knew: the place needed substantial work, but the bones were good. I ran financial projections until my eyes blurred, calculating how long I could operate at a loss before turning a profit. I told no one about what I was doing, not even my closest friends. Years of having my dreams dismissed by family had made me protective of this one. I feared discouragement and judgment, especially since I was considering leaving my prestigious partnership to run a mountain resort with no hospitality experience. The purchase process was complicated and stressful. There were moments I almost backed out, questioning my sanity. But whenever doubt crept in, I would drive to the property and sit by the lake, envisioning what could be. The peace I felt there confirmed I was making the right decision. The day I signed the final papers, Harold handed me a set of ancient keys, and tears welled in his eyes. Margaret and I had our first date here when it was owned by her uncle, he said. We built our whole life in this valley. Promise me you will honor the spirit of this place. I promised, feeling the weight of his trust along with my own dreams. With property in hand, I began the daunting task of renovation while still working my full-time job. I hired local contractors for the major structural work, but spent every weekend and many evenings painting, cleaning, and learning the systems of the resort. My hands, once manicured for client meetings, became calloused and often paint-splattered. I focused first on fully renovating one cabin as a proof of concept. I updated the bathroom, replaced the flooring, and furnished it with comfortable but rustic pieces that maintained the authentic mountain character. The work was exhausting but deeply satisfying in a way my corporate job had never been. Working with the local contractors introduced me to the tight-knit mountain community. Unlike my experiences in corporate Denver, where connections were often transactional, the mountain residents were genuinely helpful once they realized I was not a developer planning to destroy the property's character. Toby, the 70-year-old plumber who had maintained the resort systems for decades, spent hours teaching me about the well and septic systems. Lucia, who owned the local general store, introduced me to regional artisans whose work could add authentic character to the cabins. The first paying guests arrived 3 months after my purchase. I had managed to renovate only one cabin and make essential repairs to the lodge, but it was a start. A young couple from Texas celebrating their anniversary became Pineriidge Resort's first customers under my ownership. When they left a glowing review online, I printed it out and pinned it to the office wall, my first tangible evidence that this crazy dream might actually work. In those first months, I discovered strengths I never knew I had. I learned to unclog toilets, negotiate with suppliers, and create marketing materials. I also discovered weaknesses, particularly in hospitality, where my corporate directness sometimes came across as brusque to guests expecting mountain warmth. But most importantly, I found acceptance. In this community, I was not the overlooked daughter or the workaholic financial advisor. I was simply Marissa, the new owner of Pineriidge, who was working hard to restore a beloved local landmark. This sense of belonging was something I had never fully experienced in my own family. It strengthened my resolve to make the resort succeed not just as a business, but as my home. While I was secretly pouring my heart and savings into Pineriidge Resort, family dynamics continued their predictable patterns. My parents called weekly, but our conversations rarely centered on my life. Instead, they would update me on Jake's latest brewery progress and express constant concern about his financial struggles. The brewery equipment cost more than expected, my mother explained during one call. Jake had to put it all on credit cards. We are helping where we can, but maybe you could talk to him about a loan, just until he starts turning a profit. I deflected these suggestions as gently as possible. I am not comfortable mixing family and financial arrangements, I would say. But I am happy to review his business plan if he wants advice. He never asked for advice, only money, which I consistently refused to provide. The tension escalated when Jake and his wife Amanda announced they were expecting twins. My parents were ecstatic about becoming grandparents, and Jake immediately leveraged this news to secure more financial support. We will need a bigger house now, I overheard him telling our parents during a family dinner. Something with space for the kids to grow. Maybe up in the mountains where the air is clean. My mother squeezed his hand. We will figure something out. We have always dreamed of having grandchildren nearby. I sat quietly pushing food around my plate, wondering if they had ever dreamed about my future or my potential children. The thought was quickly dismissed. I had long ago accepted my place in the family hierarchy. A week later, I stopped by my parents' house unexpectedly to drop off a birthday gift for my mother. Their door was unlocked as usual, and I heard voices from the kitchen. I paused in the hallway when I realized they were discussing finances. We could use some of the retirement fund, my father was saying. It would mean working a few more years, but Jake needs this. The brewery will succeed if he just has enough runway, and the kids will need a good place to grow up. What about the lake property fund, my mother asked. We have been saving that for almost 30 years. That might be our best option, my father agreed. It is not like we will use it anytime soon, and this is what it was meant for anyway. Family legacy. I quietly left without announcing my presence, my gift left on the entry table. I drove straight to Pineriidge, my emotions churning. The Lake Property Fund had been mentioned occasionally throughout my childhood. My parents had been saving to buy a vacation property someday. I had always assumed it was a distant dream given our solidly middle-class lifestyle. Now I realized they had been serious disciplined even about this particular goal. Just not for me, never for me. The irony was painful. While they had been saving for their lake house dream, I had been saving for and actually purchasing my own mountain resort. While they were considering emptying their retirement to bail out Jake yet again, I was working 80-hour weeks between my corporate job and resort renovations. That evening, sitting on the dock at my own lake, I considered telling them about Pineriidge. Perhaps seeing what I had accomplished would change how they viewed me. Perhaps they would finally be proud. But years of experience held me back. I could predict their reactions with painful accuracy. My mother would worry about the financial risk. My father would question my hospitality experience. Both would frame it as another example of my obsession with proving something. The joy of my achievement would be diminished, analyzed, and ultimately redirected to concerns about Jake, who really could use your business expertise right now. So I maintained my silence, creating elaborate excuses for why I was unavailable on weekends and evenings. I became skilled at answering questions about my life with vague statements that satisfied curiosity without revealing truth. It was exhausting to maintain the facade, adding emotional strain to the already significant physical demands of running the resort while keeping my corporate job. As my parents' anniversary approached, they planned a special family dinner. "We have some exciting news to share," my mother hinted during her invitation call. I sensed an opportunity. After 6 months of secret ownership, Pineriidge was starting to take shape. 3 of the 5 cabins were fully renovated. The lodge's great room had been restored to its former glory. Bookings were increasing weekly as positive reviews accumulated online. Perhaps this anniversary dinner was the perfect moment to reveal my accomplishment. With everyone gathered for a celebration, the mood would be positive. My news could be framed as an achievement rather than a rejection of family values. I prepared carefully organizing property documents, photos of the renovations, and early financial projections showing the resort's promising future. I placed everything in a professional portfolio, the kind I used for major client presentations. The night before the dinner, I stood in the resort's great room looking out at the moonlight reflecting on the lake. "Tomorrow, everything changes," I said to the empty room. "Tomorrow, they will finally see me." I allowed myself to imagine their reactions: surprise, giving way to admiration, perhaps even regret for having underestimated me for so long. After years of feeling invisible in my own family, I would become impossible to ignore. In retrospect, I should have known better. But hope is a persistent thing, especially when it comes to family. Despite all evidence to the contrary, some part of me still believed that this time would be different. This time they would see me. My parents' anniversary dinner was set for 7 o'clock at their suburban Denver home. I arrived at 6:30 nicely dressed, in a blue blouse and tailored slacks, my portfolio of resort documents tucked discreetly in my handbag. My mother greeted me with a distracted hug, already looking past me toward the driveway. "Is that your brother?" she asked, clearly disappointed when she saw it was just the neighbor walking their dog. I helped set the table and arrange the flowers I had brought, making small talk about the unusually warm spring weather. My father joined us immediately, asking if I had heard from Jake. "He texted that they are running late," I said, having received the message moments earlier. "Of course," my father said with an indulgent smile. "With Amanda being pregnant, they have to move a bit slower these days." Jake and Amanda finally arrived at 7:45, nearly an hour late. My pregnant sister-in-law received elaborate attention from my parents, being guided to the most comfortable chair and fussed over continuously. Jake accepted their doting as his due, regaling everyone with stories about the brewery's progress. "The equipment installation is finally complete," he announced, as we began eating the roast beef dinner my mother had prepared. "We should be brewing our first official batch next week." "That is wonderful, honey," my mother beamed. "Your father and I were just saying how impressed we are with your vision." I ate quietly, waiting for an appropriate moment to share my news. The conversation never veered in my direction. When dessert was served, my mother inquired about Amanda's pregnancy, Jake's business, and even the neighbor's new landscaping. Not once did anyone ask about my work or life. As coffee was served, my father cleared his throat. "Your mother and I have an announcement to make," he said, reaching for my mother's hand. "As you know, we have been saving for many years for something special." My mother smiled widely. "We wanted to wait until the perfect moment to share this, and with the twins coming, that moment is now." My stomach tightened. I clutched my handbag a little closer. "We have been putting money aside for 30 years toward a lake property in the mountains," my father continued, "a place where the family could gather for holidays and summers." I froze coffee cup halfway to my lips. My mother turned to Jake and Amanda. "We are so proud. Your brother's kids will love growing up here in the mountains. We have enough saved now, and we want to help you find the perfect property to build your family home." The room seemed to spin slightly. I carefully set down my cup to hide the trembling of my hand. "We know with the twins coming you will need more space," my father added. "And the brewery is just getting started, so finances must be tight. We want to help you establish roots in a place that can become a legacy for our grandchildren." Jake looked stunned but quickly recovered. "Wow, that is incredibly generous. We have been worried about space, but did not know how to afford a move right now." Amanda wiped away tears. "This means everything to us. The twins will have such a wonderful childhood with space to run and play." "That is interesting." I finally managed to say, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm raging inside me. All eyes turned to me, perhaps registering for the first time that I had barely spoken all evening. "Interesting," my mother repeated. With deliberate calm, I reached into my handbag and withdrew the portfolio. I placed it on the table and opened it to reveal photographs of Pineriidge Resort, along with the property deed bearing my name. "I thought this might be a good time to share some news of my own," I said. 6 months ago, I purchased this mountain resort, 15 acres, 5 cabins, and a main lodge on Alpine Lake. Silence descended on the table. My parents stared at the photos with expressions of confusion. Jake leaned forward, frowning as he examined the documents. "You bought a vacation home?" My mother finally asked, her tone suggesting I had made an impulsive purchase like a pair of expensive shoes. "Not exactly," I replied. "I bought a business, Pineriidge Resort. I have been renovating it while maintaining my partnership at Westridge. We are already operational with 3 cabins and the lodge complete." My father picked up one of the photos. "This looks like a significant investment. Is this why you have been so unavailable lately?" I nodded. "I have been working there every weekend and most evenings." "Why would you do this without telling anyone?" my mother asked, sounding more bewildered than impressed. "This seems like a huge risk. What do you know about running a resort?" Before I could answer, Jake interjected. "This is actually perfect timing," he said, his entrepreneur's mind clearly calculating angles. "We could use this property for our mountain home. The twins would have all that space, and you could still keep it as a business. Win-win." "It is not a vacation property," I clarified firmly. "It is my business and my home. I am planning to move there permanently next month and manage it full-time." "You are leaving your partnership?" my father asked, appearing genuinely alarmed now. "Marissa, that is your career. You have worked so hard for that position." "This is my dream," I said simply. "I have wanted this since I was 9 years old. I have worked, saved, and planned for this specific goal." "Well," my mother said with a tight smile, "I suppose it is nice that you can afford to indulge in a hobby property. But buying a mountain resort seems a bit selfish right now when your brother is starting a family and needs help establishing roots for his children." The word selfish hit like a physical blow. Years of therapy had prepared me for disappointment, but not for this particular pain. Jake looked thoughtfully at the photos. "How much did you pay for this place? If you are having second thoughts, I might be interested in taking it over. We could work out a family rate." I stared at him, momentarily speechless. Then, with a calm I did not feel, I began gathering the documents and photos, sliding them back into the portfolio. "This is not a hobby," I said evenly. This is not an impulsive purchase. This is the culmination of 20 years of disciplined saving and planning. I employed the same financial principles I teach my clients. I did my due diligence. I have a business plan projecting profitability within 2 years. I stood up portfolio in hand. And no, Jake, I am not having second thoughts, nor am I interested in selling to you or anyone else. This is my dream, and for once I would have appreciated if my family could simply be happy for me. My mother looked stricken. Of course we are happy for you, dear. We just worry about such a big change. My father added, and the timing is unfortunate with Jake's needs right now. I nodded, a lifetime of understanding crystallizing in that moment. The timing has always been unfortunate for my accomplishments. There has always been something more important happening with Jake. I picked up my handbag. Thank you for dinner. Congratulations on your anniversary. I walked out without waiting for a response, got into my car, and drove away from my parents' house. For the first time, it truly felt like I was driving not just away from something, but toward something entirely my own. The 2-hour drive from Denver to Pineriidge Resort became a journey through my emotional landscape. I started out numb, operating on autopilot as I navigated the familiar highway. As the city lights faded behind me and the road began to wind into the mountains, the protective shock wore off. Tears came in waves, blurring the headlights of oncoming cars. I pulled over at a scenic overlook, unable to drive safely through my distress. Sitting in my car under the vast Colorado night sky, I finally allowed the full weight of the evening to crash over me. I had known intellectually that my revelation would not receive the reception I secretly hoped for, but experiencing it firsthand had shattered something fundamental inside me. Why was I never enough? I asked the empty car, my voice breaking on the question. What was wrong with me that they could never see me? The mountains offered no answer, just silent witness to my pain. After 20 minutes of released grief, I wiped my face, took several deep breaths, and continued driving. As the elevation increased, something inside me shifted. Each mile seemed to create distance, not just physically from my family, but emotionally from their power to wound me. By the time I turned onto the gravel drive of Pineriidge, my tears had dried. I parked in front of the main lodge and sat for a moment looking at what I had created. Solar-powered lights illuminated the rustic sign and the path to the lodge door. The renovated building stood solid and welcoming against the mountain backdrop. This was real. This was mine. And I had done it entirely on my own. I unlocked the lodge and walked into the great room. Without turning on the lights, I moved to stand before the massive picture window overlooking the lake. Moonlight silvered the water's surface and outlined the silhouettes of pine trees. The quietness wrapped around me like a blanket. For the first time since leaving my parents' house, I examined the portfolio I had so carefully prepared. The photos showed the transformation of the property under my care. The financial documents detailed my investment and projected return. Everything was meticulously organized as I had been taught to do for client presentations. I had approached this deeply personal revelation as I approached everything else in my life with professional precision. Perhaps therein lay part of the problem. I had always tried to earn my parents' love through achievement, as if family affection operated on the same merit-based system as the corporate world. 20 years of evidence suggested otherwise, yet I had persisted in the same approach, hoping for a different outcome. The portfolio slipped from my fingers, scattering documents across the polished wooden floor. I made no move to collect them. Instead, I sank into one of the oversized armchairs facing the fireplace, emotionally exhausted. My phone buzzed with incoming calls and texts, first from my mother, then my father, finally Jake. I silenced it without reading the messages. Whatever justifications or explanations they offered would not change the fundamental dynamics that had been reinforced tonight. Around midnight, an unexpected text came through from my cousin Sophie, my aunt's daughter, who was 5 years younger than me. Just heard what happened at dinner. That is messed up. Are you okay? Sophie and I had never been particularly close, but we had always been cordial. Unlike Jake, she had never been part of the family favoritism dynamic, being from my mother's sister's family. Not really, I texted back honestly. Where are you? She asked. At my resort. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. You're what you own a resort. That is badass. Can I see pics? I found myself smiling faintly as I sent her several photos. Her enthusiastic response was the first positive family reaction I had received. Holy crap, Marissa, this is amazing. Mom and I are coming to visit as soon as possible. We texted back and forth for nearly an hour. She explained that my mother had called her mom in tears about my reckless business decision and selfish behavior in the face of Jake's needs. Sophie, however, had immediately recognized the situation for what it was. They have always been weird about you and Jake, she wrote. Everyone in the extended family sees it, but nobody talks about it. For what it is worth, I think what you have done is incredible. Her support coming from the periphery of the family circle provided unexpected comfort. At least someone related to me could see and acknowledge my achievement without immediately redirecting attention to Jake. I finally went upstairs to the owner's apartment I had created in what was once storage space above the lodge. It was simple but comfortable with exposed beams and a small balcony overlooking the lake. This would be my permanent home once I left my condo in Denver. For tonight, it would be my sanctuary. As I prepared for bed, I realized this was my first time actually sleeping at the resort as its owner. Despite my frequent work visits, I had always returned to Denver afterward, maintaining the separation between my secret project and regular life. Tonight, those worlds had collided and there was no going back. I slept fitfully, my dreams filled with fragments of the dinner conversation playing on endless loop. When dawn broke, I moved to the balcony with a cup of coffee, watching the mist rise from the lake's surface. The mountains stood solid and immutable in the background, a reminder of permanence amid life's fluctuations. In that quiet morning moment, clarity arrived with surprising gentleness. The validation I had sought from my family would never come in the form I wanted. No achievement, no success, no property or business would ever shift the fundamental dynamics established in childhood. My parents would always see Jake as the one needing support and me as the self-sufficient one who should understand and accommodate his needs. But here was the revelation: I no longer needed their validation. The resort itself, the community I was building here, the vision I was bringing to life, these things were real and valuable regardless of whether my family could recognize them. My worth was not determined by their ability to see it. The understanding settled into my bones with the warming rays of the morning sun. I would not cut off my family, but I would stop expecting them to be something they could not be. I would establish boundaries based on what was healthy for me, rather than what might finally earn their approval. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I felt truly free, not just financially independent, but emotionally liberated from the endless cycle of seeking validation and being disappointed. The mountain air seemed fresher, the coffee tasted richer, and the path ahead, while still challenging, appeared clearer than ever before. The 3 months following the disastrous family dinner became a period of intense transformation, both for Pineriidge Resort and for me personally. After that night, I made several life-altering decisions that would have seemed reckless to the cautious financial advisor I had been for years. First, I submitted my resignation to Westridge Financial, giving a generous 1-month notice to transition my clients to other partners. My colleagues were shocked. Several senior partners attempted to change my mind with offers of increased compensation and reduced hours, but my decision was firm. I had built an impressive career, but it had never brought me the satisfaction I found in a single day at Pineriidge. I appreciate everything I have learned here, I told the managing partner during our final meeting, but I have discovered that success without fulfillment is just an expensive way to be unhappy. With my corporate responsibilities concluded, I sold my Denver condo and moved permanently to the owner's apartment above the lodge. Leaving behind city life was surprisingly easy. The morning symphony of birdsong replaced traffic noise, and the evening ritual of watching sunset over the lake supplanted after-work happy hours. My financial cushion was gone, invested entirely in the resort. For the first time since childhood, I lived without a safety net. Rather than frightening me, this reality energized my efforts to make Pineriidge successful. I knew I could not do it alone. The resort needed a team, not just hired help, but people who shared my vision for what this place could become. Through a combination of luck and careful selection, I assembled a core group who would become not just colleagues but something closer to family. George Peterson was a local handyman in his 60s who had done occasional maintenance for Harold. Initially hired for specific repairs, he gradually became a full-time fixture, bringing decades of practical knowledge about everything from septic systems to wildlife management. His wife had died years earlier, and his children lived across the country, making the resort community his primary social connection. "You are doing good work here," he told me after finishing the renovation of the 4th cabin. "Harold and Margaret would be pleased." Tina Rodriguez joined next, a 35-year-old marketing professional who had burned out on Denver's corporate scene and moved to the mountains seeking a different lifestyle. I found her through a local Facebook group when she posted about seeking part-time work that would utilize her skills but allow time for hiking and painting. Her expertise in digital marketing and social media proved invaluable for attracting the right clientele. Rachel Williams completed the core team, bringing 20 years of hospitality experience from various mountain resorts across Colorado. At 48, she had been looking for a smaller, more intimate setting, where guest experience took precedence over corporate metrics. Her warmth with guests balanced my sometimes too direct approach, and her practical knowledge filled crucial gaps in my hospitality education. Together we worked to define what made Pineriidge special, in an increasingly crowded market of mountain getaways. Rather than competing with luxury resorts offering spa treatments and gourmet restaurants, we emphasized authenticity, tranquility, and connection with nature. "People do not come to the mountains for marble bathrooms and turn-down service," Rachel observed during one of our planning sessions. "They come to remember what matters when all the noise of modern life is stripped away." This insight became our guiding principle. We renovated with quality materials, but maintained the rustic character that gave the resort its soul. Cabins featured comfortable beds, reliable heating, and updated bathrooms, but deliberately lacked televisions. Instead, each cabin offered a carefully curated bookshelf, board games, and a detailed guide to local hiking trails and wildlife spotting. The main lodge became our centerpiece, with its soaring ceiling and massive stone fireplace. We added comfortable seating groups that encouraged conversation, a selection of local wines and craft beers, and weekend acoustic music performed by regional artists. Most importantly, we created community among guests through optional shared activities like guided nature walks and evening campfires with storytelling. 3 months after going full-time, we achieved our first fully booked weekend. All 5 renovated cabins and the 2 lodge rooms were occupied with a waiting list, should there be cancellations. Guests came primarily through word of mouth and increasingly positive online reviews, praising the authentic mountain experience and peaceful retreat from digital overload. The financial challenges remained significant. Renovation costs had exceeded projections, and ongoing maintenance of a property this size was constant. I paid myself last, often foregoing salary entirely in leaner months. But the trajectory was positive, with bookings increasing steadily and repeat customers becoming common. Throughout this period, my contact with family was minimal. My parents had called repeatedly in the weeks following the dinner, leaving voicemails that ranged from concerned to critical. I responded with brief texts, assuring them I was fine but needed space. Jake sent one message suggesting again that my resort would make a perfect family compound for his growing family, which I left unanswered. Sophie was the exception. True to her word, she and my aunt visited for a weekend in June, genuinely delighting in the resort and my accomplishment. "I get it now," Sophie said as we sat by the lake one evening. "This place feels like you somehow. Strong but welcoming, no pretense, just real." Her validation, freely given without comparison to Jake or concern about family dynamics, meant more than any professional accolade I had ever received. In late July, an unexpected visitor arrived at the resort. I was checking in a family from California when I looked up to see Amanda, Jake's wife, standing awkwardly in the lodge entrance. Her pregnancy was much more visible now, her hands resting protectively on her rounded belly. "Amanda," I said, surprised, "is everything okay?" She nodded, looking around the lodge with wide eyes. "Jake does not know I am here," she said quietly. "Can we talk privately?" After settling the California family in their cabin, I took Amanda to my private office behind the reception desk. She sank gratefully into a chair, accepting the water I offered. "This place is beautiful," she said, genuine admiration in her voice. The pictures did not do it justice. "Thank you," I replied, cautious about her purpose in coming alone. "What brings you up here today?" Amanda took a deep breath. "The brewery is failing," she said bluntly. "Jake will not admit it, but we have not sold enough to cover even basic costs for 3 months running. The equipment loans are 60 days past due." I nodded, unsurprised but sympathetic to her obvious distress. "Your parents have been helping," she continued, "but they are struggling too. Your father had to postpone retirement, and I think they have taken a second mortgage on their house." This was new information and concerning. My parents were in their mid-60s, hardly the time to be taking on additional debt. "I am sorry to hear that," I said carefully. "Jake thinks they are still planning to help with the mountain property for the twins," Amanda said, her voice dropping. "But I overheard your mother telling him they need to put that plan on hold. They simply do not have the funds right now." The irony was painful. After a lifetime of my parents prioritizing Jake's needs over everything, including their own financial security, they had finally reached their limit just as he was expecting their biggest contribution yet. Amanda looked directly at me. "I did not come to ask for money," she said, surprising me. "Jake would be furious if he knew I was here at all. I came because I need to understand how you did this." She gestured around us. "How you built something real, while Jake keeps failing despite all the support he gets." The question caught me off guard. I had expected a financial appeal, not genuine curiosity about my process. For the next hour, Amanda and I had the most honest conversation we had ever shared. I explained my years of saving, the detailed planning, the professional guidance I had sought before purchasing the resort. She listened intently, occasionally taking notes on her phone. "The difference," I finally said, "is that I never expected anyone to rescue me if I failed. I knew from the beginning that this was entirely my responsibility, so I did the necessary preparation. Jake has always had a safety net." Amanda nodded slowly. "That makes sense," she said quietly. "I love him, but I worry about the example we are setting for our children. I want them to learn self-reliance, not entitlement." As I walked her to her car, she paused to look back at the resort. "Would it be okay if I brought the twins here sometimes after they are born? Just for day visits. I want them to see what their aunt has built." "Of course," I said, touched by the request. "They will always be welcome here." After she left, I found myself thinking about family in new ways. The ties of blood were complicated, often painfully so, but perhaps there were possibilities for connection that did not require sacrificing my own boundaries or well-being. The following week, we installed the new sign at the resort entrance, Pineriidge Resort. It proclaimed in hand-carved letters against a background of mountain silhouettes. Standing before it with my small team, champagne glasses in hand for a modest celebration, I felt a sense of ownership deeper than any legal document could convey. This was not just a business. This was my declaration of independence, my statement of values, and increasingly the foundation of a chosen family built on mutual respect and shared vision. Whatever came next with my blood relations, I had created something authentically mine. Something that could never be diminished by their inability to see its value or my worth. 6 months after the anniversary dinner revelation, Pineriidge Resort had settled into a comfortable autumn rhythm. The summer rush had ended, leaving us with a steadier flow of weekend guests seeking fall foliage and early-season skiing at nearby slopes. I had finally begun paying myself a modest salary, and the resort's financial projections showed continued improvement. On a crisp November Saturday, I was in the lodge preparing for an afternoon wine tasting featuring local Colorado vineyards when George appeared at my elbow. "You have visitors," he said quietly. "Your parents and brother are waiting on the deck." My heart seemed to skip several beats. In the 6 months since our confrontation, my parents had called periodically and sent occasional texts, which I had answered politely but briefly. Jake had not contacted me at all, after my failure to respond to his family compound suggestion. "Did they say what they want?" I asked, buying time to compose myself. George shook his head. "Just that they would like to speak with you when convenient." I nodded, straightened my shoulders, and walked through the great room toward the deck doors. Through the glass, I could see my family arranged awkwardly on the outdoor furniture. looking simultaneously out of place and entitled to be there. As I pushed open the door, my mother rose immediately. "Marissa, this place is lovely," she said, moving as if to hug me but stopping when she registered my reserved expression. "Thank you," I replied, remaining by the door. "What brings you all the way up here today?" My father stood next, hands in pockets. "We thought it was time we saw this resort of yours properly. Your mother and I have been concerned about how things were left at our anniversary dinner." Jake remained seated, scanning the property with an evaluative eye. "The location is prime," he commented, as if conducting an appraisal. "You must have paid a fortune for this much lakefront." I ignored his comment, focusing on my parents. "Would you like a tour before we talk?" They agreed readily, and I spent the next 45 minutes showing them the renovated cabins, the expanded dock, and the nature trails we had developed on the property. My mother commented positively on the decor choices, while my father asked surprisingly detailed questions about the well system and heating infrastructure. Jake trailed behind, periodically checking his phone and appearing generally disinterested until we reached the newly constructed outdoor pavilion overlooking the lake, designed for small weddings and corporate retreats. "This has serious potential," he said, his entrepreneurial interest finally engaged. "You could charge premium rates for events up here." "We already do," I replied simply. "We are booked for weddings every weekend next June through September." When the tour concluded, I brought them to a private corner of the main lodge, where Rachel had set up coffee and freshly baked muffins, then discreetly withdrawn. The moment had a strained formality, like a business meeting rather than a family gathering. "The resort is impressive," my father began after an awkward silence. "You have clearly put substantial work into the renovations." "Thank you," I said. "It has been challenging, but rewarding." My mother reached across the table to touch my hand. "We owe you an apology, Marissa. Our reaction at the anniversary dinner was not supportive. We were surprised, and we handled it poorly." The acknowledgement, while appreciated, seemed practiced rather than deeply felt. I nodded but waited for more substantial explanation. "The timing was unfortunate," my father added. "We had just shared our plans to help Jake, and then your announcement seemed to come out of nowhere." "I understand that," I said carefully. "But my resort purchase did not happen on a whim. I had been working toward this specific goal for 20 years, since that family vacation when I was 9. I told you then that I wanted to own a place like this someday." My mother looked genuinely surprised. "I do not remember that." "I do," I said simply. "It was the first time I articulated the dream that has guided most of my financial decisions throughout my adult life." Jake, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. "Look, water under the bridge. We are here because we have a proposition that could benefit everyone." I turned to him, already wary of where this was heading. "The brewery is pivoting," he continued, using his practiced pitch voice. "The production side is challenging in the current market, but the hospitality aspect shows real promise. We are thinking of expanding into destination experiences." Meaning, I prompted when he paused dramatically. "A partnership between Pineriidge Resort and Mountain Valley Brewing. We could create exclusive beer retreats, brewing workshops, tasting events. The synergy would be incredible." I looked at him steadily. "And what exactly would each partner contribute to this arrangement?" Jake smiled confidently. "You already have the infrastructure, the location. We bring the brewing expertise, the brand recognition in the Denver craft beer scene, and my marketing network." "What would the ownership structure be?" I asked, keeping my tone professional. He hesitated only briefly. "We were thinking 60-40 with Mountain Valley Brewing as majority partner, given the value of our established brand." The audacity was breathtaking. After less than a year in business with no demonstrable success, he was proposing to take controlling interest in the resort I had poured my life savings and countless hours into developing. My parents watched anxiously, clearly aware of and supportive of this proposal. Their presence was not coincidental, but strategic, intended to provide family pressure to accept Jake's proposition. I took a slow, deliberate sip of coffee, using the moment to organize my thoughts. When I set the cup down, my hand was perfectly steady. No, I said simply. Jake blinked clearly, not expecting such a direct refusal. You should at least consider it. The potential upside is enormous. I have considered it in the approximately 90 seconds since you proposed it, I replied evenly. Pineriidge Resort is not for sale, not for partnership, and not available as collateral for your latest venture. My mother's expression tightened. Marissa, this could be wonderful for both of you. Think of it as a family business. That is exactly the problem, I said, looking directly at her. Our family has never operated as equal partners. For as long as I can remember, Jake's needs and desires have taken precedence over mine. His failures have been cushioned while my successes have been taken for granted. I have built this business entirely on my own, and I have no intention of compromising its success to rescue another of Jake's failing ventures. My bluntness left them momentarily speechless. Jake recovered first, his expression darkening. So that is what this is about. You are still hung up on some perceived childhood favoritism. Grow up, Marissa. This is business. Exactly, I agreed. This is business. And in business, track records matter. Mine demonstrates consistent success through disciplined planning and execution. Yours shows repeated failures despite significant external support. That alone would make this partnership unappealing regardless of family history. My father shifted uncomfortably. There is no need to be harsh. Your brother is trying to find a solution that works for everyone. No, I corrected gently. He is trying to find a solution that works for him using family obligation as leverage. That has been the pattern our entire lives, and I am no longer participating in it. Jake stood abruptly. This is bullshit. I came here in good faith to offer a collaborative opportunity, and you are throwing childhood grievances in my face. Some things never change. You have always been selfish and cold. Rather than responding with matching anger, I remained seated, my voice calm. I wish you success with your brewery, Jake. Genuinely. But that success needs to be built on your own merit and hard work, not by leveraging what I have built. He stormed out without another word, the lodge door slamming behind him. My parents exchanged worried glances. He is under tremendous pressure, my mother said defensively. With the twins coming and the brewery struggling. I understand that, I said. But his pressure does not constitute my emergency. Nor does it obligate me to compromise what I have worked so hard to build. My father looked at me with an expression I could not quite read, somewhere between regret and realization. We may have done you both a disservice, he said quietly. Making things too easy for Jake and expecting too much self-sufficiency from you. The acknowledgement, however partial, was more than I had ever expected to hear. I appreciate you saying that, I said sincerely. What happens now? My mother asked, sounding lost. With the family, I mean. I considered the question carefully. That depends on whether we can establish new patterns based on mutual respect. I am not cutting contact, but I am maintaining firm boundaries around what I will and will not do, particularly financially. And Jake, she pressed. That is largely up to him, I replied. I am open to a relationship that does not involve financial entanglement or business propositions. I'll accreted. I'm open to a relationship, but it would need to be reciprocal with genuine interest in my life and accomplishments, not just what I can provide. We talked for another hour, covering difficult ground more honestly than we ever had before. There were no miraculous breakthroughs or tearful reconciliations, just the beginning of a more authentic understanding of our family dynamics and the possibility of healthier patterns moving forward. When they left, promising to visit again under less contentious circumstances, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: grief for the family relationship I had always wanted but never had relief at having maintained my boundaries, and tentative hope that perhaps some healing was possible even if our relationships would never be what I had once imagined. 1 year later, Pineriidge Resort had exceeded even my optimistic projections. We had expanded to include 2 additional cabins built on the far side of the property, and the wedding pavilion had become a sought-after venue for intimate mountain ceremonies. We were fully booked 6 months in advance for peak seasons, with a growing list of repeat guests who had become almost like extended family. My own healing journey had progressed through multiple avenues. Weekly therapy sessions helped me process both old family wounds and the challenges of entrepreneurship. The resort community, including staff and regular guests, provided a sense of belonging I had never experienced in my biological family. And somewhat surprisingly, I had developed a relationship with Daniel Morgan, a local artist who taught watercolor workshops at the resort and gradually became more than a business associate. My relationship with my family had evolved into something I could accept, if not what I had once dreamed of. My parents visited occasionally, our interactions cordial if not deeply connected. They had finally acknowledged the resort's success, though they still struggled to understand why I had abandoned a prestigious corporate career for this mountain life. Jake and I maintained minimal contact, exchanging birthday texts and seeing each other at major family gatherings. After the twins were born, Amanda occasionally brought them to the resort for day visits as she had requested. During these visits, she and I developed an unexpected friendship based on mutual respect and her genuine interest in business management. The most meaningful family connection, however, came through Sophie. My cousin had become a regular presence at Pineriidge, spending several weekends each season, helping with special events or simply enjoying the mountain atmosphere. When she announced her engagement and asked if she could hold her small wedding at the resort, I was moved beyond words. "You were the only one who saw me," I told her during the wedding planning. "The only one in the family who recognized what I was building here." Sophie hugged me tightly. "What you have created here is magical, Marissa. Not just the place, but the feeling. People come here and remember what matters, including me." On the evening of Sophie's wedding, standing at the back of the pavilion watching her exchange vows with the lake and mountains as backdrop, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. This was why I had built Pineriidge. Not for profit or professional achievement, but to create a space where moments like this could happen, where people could connect with nature, with each other, and with their authentic selves. The path that had led me here was more difficult than I could have imagined when I first dreamed of owning a mountain resort at age 9. It had required not only financial discipline and business acumen, but emotional resilience, and the courage to stand firm in my own worth when those closest to me could not see it. The greatest wisdom I had gained was understanding that validation comes from within, not from external sources, even those we love most. Success is not measured by others' recognition, but by alignment with one's own values and purpose. Family is not just about blood, but about who sees you truly and celebrates your authentic self. As I watched Sophie and her new husband share their first dance under the stars, I realized I had created something far more valuable than a profitable business. I had built a life of integrity, purpose, and genuine connection on my own terms. And in doing so, I had finally found the freedom that comes not from others' approval, but from being fully unapologetically myself. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family expectations and your own dreams? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey of finding self-worth resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more stories about overcoming family challenges and building a life on your own terms. Thank you for joining me today, and remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is believe in yourself when no one else does. Until next time, this is Marissa reminding you that you are enough exactly as you are.